Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is McKay. In today's episode, we're just going to give you a very quick and brief market update of the DXY, the S&P 500, and potentially what we believe that those two will lead Bitcoin to do, key levels to look out for as far as pricing is concerned. For those of you that have been following my how to set up a trade using the coin of XRP, just know that fourth and final video will be coming out most likely on Wednesday. I'll finish the recording of it tomorrow, and if I have enough time, I'll try to get it out then. If not, I'll post it on Wednesday, at least here in the United States. So I just wanted to give you kind of an update on that. But as far as this video goes, just a quick overall update on the market and, the levels that I'm watching and, potentially some trade ideas as it relates to at least Bitcoin. If that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Okie dokie, so the first place we want to start out, as we always have recently on the channel for the past month or two, is the DXY. It's just a chart that represents the strength of the US dollar. And we've observed, generally speaking, that on these higher time frames, that anytime that the DXY, or the strength of the dollar bill, is going to the upside, having an impulse wave to the upside, that has generally led to a pullback in traditional stocks. And the reverse is true, that anytime this has had a pullback, that's led to a move to the upside out of traditional stocks. Now, until the FTX situation that just recently happened, Bitcoin's been so highly correlated with traditional stocks that the order of operations has been check what the DXY is doing on these higher time frames, then check and see what the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100 are doing, to then kind of govern or give you a bias as to what Bitcoin's likely going to do. So that's just kind of been the order of operations. Now, the FTX or Black Swan event that just happened, that briefly led Bitcoin and the crypto market as a whole to decouple from the traditional stocks. Essentially kind of did its own thing where it just dumped while traditional stocks were basically still moving to the upside. However, it's not confirmed yet, but I would still believe, based on just the history of this whole past year, that now that dust is kind of settled with the FTX situation, that most likely, going forward, we're going to continue to see that they're so highly correlated that whatever the S&P 500 is doing based off of the DXY, that crypto is going to follow what the S&P 500 is doing just because they're so highly correlated, right? All right, so that being said, we've just been tracking some ideas here on the DXY for the past several months, actually. But most recently, what we've been talking about is just this entire year, as the DXY, or the strength of the US dollar, has more or less been going parabolic, that you've had a series of trend lines that have acted as support. You've had this trend line the whole year, where it was bouncing on it several occasions. Then, when we first started really covering it on the channel, it was during this more parabolic trend line that was acting as support. And we first spoke about the idea that this could potentially be a top. And what we were looking for to verify that was a breakdown and a retest of the underside of this trend line here to flip it from being support to resistance. Then we want to see a lower high than this high, which so far has all come true, and that this would represent a good time to basically shift back in to some short-term long trades with stocks, and of course, if you prefer to trade things like Bitcoin and altcoins. Well, that all has come to fruition for the most part until just really these last 3, 4, 5 days or so, where this has actually continued to come down. We even talked about the idea of it losing this major support here that had been holding it up all year, and that this right here would represent a really good move to the upside out of Bitcoin, something between, low side 22,500, upside 25K. However, because of the FTX situation, even though traditional stocks, as we'll show you in just a minute, saw upside, the Bitcoin actually saw the opposite of that, of course, which drug the entire crypto market to the downside. All that being said, there really is only two things I'm watching as far as the DXY goes, kind of a plan A, plan B, and there really is all the ideas based around is whether or not we're going to get a little bit more upside first out of traditional stocks based on the idea that the DXY may come down and retest, as we've been talking about for a while now, these 200 moving averages on the daily. Most likely you would see a bounce from there. That would be plan A, which we'll talk about on the S&P 500 in a second. Plan B would be that we actually go ahead and just move to the upside first, kind of come up here somewhere in this area to retest this previous support there. There's some confluence because it comes together with this major area of support here, and it would make sense for price action on the DXY to retest that as, resistance in this case before we see yet another lower high than these two previous highs, or three really, before, then it rolls over and retests the 200. So really, Either way, I am looking for the DXY to continue to roll over the course of the next few weeks to months. But what could it do in the short term? That's where we have a plan A and a plan B. Now we're going to hop over to the ES1 explanation point, which is just the S&P 500. This is the daily chart, and this one's actually the one I've been paying more attention to because I've had my ideas for some time on the DXY, and so far they have been playing out. It's just that you can't really watch, every single day on the DXY and expect, move for move, especially on lower time frames to play out the same, the way you expect. But overall, as the DXY has been trending to the downside for the past, couple months, you have seen a good bounce out of stocks, obviously, ever since, October, mid-October, as it's been going to the upside. So I guess for the last month or so, at least, anyway, you've seen a pretty good overall move to the upside. But we've been talking about for weeks on the channel, anytime I've done an update on the markets, that we've really been watching this trend line that ever since the top up here has acted as resistance, of course, the first time, then twice, 3 times, and we were talking about clear back down here as we bounced, actually clear back down here really, as we put in essentially what was a double bottom, at least on the higher time frames, that if we were to see some upside out of the market, that the area I would be targeting for potentially some resistance, whether that's just short term or maybe even a major rejection, was going to be this area right up in here. And the reason for that is you just have a ton of confluence of resistance all waiting at that area. Number one being this trend line, which would be, in this case would be the 4th touch potentially of that, of that trend line. Number 2, you have this yellow 200, SMA and this blue 200 EMA. That's just 2 major moving averages on the daily. We're just under the, the bottom side of those now. And then you also have this red zone on my chart that was previously support, support. It acted as resistance here. Support there, resistance there. So it's just kind of a major zone of, previous support, but now that we're under it, it would act as resistance. So yeah, anytime that there's, that much coming together, it's going to naturally give me, more of a bias to the downside. So that's going to, when we hop over to Bitcoin, I'm going to explain to you kind of what I'm watching for, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to this chart. And what I mean by that is, are we going to see a rejection, which would be, the DXY potentially pushing higher in the short term, which would drag stocks down, which would, see us potentially get rejected here and see something like a retest of this area here, maybe even, break down and go down here somewhere over the next few days to a week. However, the upside ideas or the bullish hoping would be that we somehow break above and flip all 3 of these things as support right around in here. Now that key level is about 4,100 on the S&P 500, and at that point, there could be some crazy upside targets, but we would be, first looking for it to, of course, put in a higher high than that high. That would be the first sign of a trend reversal, because on the macro side, you've just had a series of lower highs to this point. The minute we break above this high here and put in a higher high, there's a lot of upside ideas. But you have to believe that, statistically speaking, we're more likely to use this major area as resistance and see some downside, at least in the short term. So now we'll just quickly end off on the Bitcoin chart, just for the key levels that I'm watching as far as upside ideas and downside ideas. And really for me, because I've already got my, ideas based on the S&P 500 as far as, breakout levels to see upside out of traditional markets, which I do believe at this point would drag crypto higher by association, or the reverse of that, of course, a breakdown of the S&P 500, or a pullback I should say, would lead to downside ideas. As far as just Bitcoin itself, I'm just watching one thing, or 2 things really, an A and a B. Now we're on the 4-hour chart here, and I'm kind of watching just this descending triangle idea here. Now I posted in my Telegram group early this morning when I was actually lying in bed still. Just this idea that a pullback in the short term could make sense. I think we were somewhere right in here, pushing up to like the 16,800 area. But you could see that price action right here had put in a high and a lower high, or it was working on a lower high. But the RSI down here in that same swing had a high and a higher high. And this is just what's known as bearish divergence. It just means, that the strength of the move to the upside is weakening, because even as you've had momentum going to the upside, there was still enough sell pressure, which you can see just by this big wick here, that was causing the price action to not follow. Because generally, the RSI and the price action, they move as one, as far as you'll usually see a high on this and a higher high, and price action should have pushed up here somewhere to do the same thing, right? Same trajectory, but there was just so much sell pressure that it wasn't able to do that. So as we clean the chart back up, there's really only 2 things I'm watching on the Bitcoin chart here on the 4-hour, and it's just this descending triangle, plan A, plan B, a bullish case and a bearish case. So for me to see any sort of upside ideas, we really need to flip this last high here inside of this triangle, as support, which would be this area up around 17,000, we'll just call it 200, which would also be a break of this trend line. So if you see something like a breakout and a closure, you need to see volume come in. Clearly you can see right now there's not a whole lot of volume. That's this indicator down here. Clearly back here there was a lot of volume on this breakdown. That usually just shows you there's strength in the move. We don't see a lot of volume here, but if you see a decent little spike, at least something, around the size of this one, of volume, as it breaks out and it can flip 17,200, as support on a 4-hour closure, then I would expect to move back up here to at least test up here at about 18,000 to 18,250, and that'll really be the bigger area that we'll be watching as far as continuation to the upside, or do we just see some sort of double top and price action trends back this way. But in the short term, that would be plan A. Look for a break and a 4-hour candle closure above 17,000. We'll just call it 250. Now plan B, which would be the downside ideas or bearish ideas, would be that this pattern, which is getting close to being about 70 to 75% full, which is typically when you see these patterns break up or down, and it is overall a bearish pattern, which just means it has a higher probability of breaking to the downside. If you see something like price action find its way back down here, especially without putting in a higher high than this one, and you see us lose this 15,850, that's a key level, 15,850. If you see a candle body break below and retest, and you see a candle body closure, so see how these candle bodies closed above that level, and then of course these were just wicks, but it closed up here. If you see a body of a candle, which is this part of the candle, on a 4-hour close below here, at that point we have downside ideas. And where would those targets be? Now, to find the target of that descending triangle, it's really just as simple as taking a measured move from this swing high here. This is the more conservative move, but we're going to take it from this swing high down to the bottom of the, the triangle. And then we're just going to move that over to potentially the areas where it break down and just see where that lines up as far as price action goes. Basically, it's just barely under 14K. Now, the idea is, do we have any confluence on that if we switch back to something like the weekly? And you'll find that if we look back here to the previous bull run, or I guess this was the bear market rally of 2019, you can see there's some confluence at that level, because that is exactly the last area during that rally in the middle of the bear market that price action saw a rejection. So to me, unless we see some lower time frame bear traps, which is stuff we'll follow up over the course of the next few days, if we do see a breakdown of the 15,000, the 15,850 area that we just talked about when we were zoomed in, that anything to me is fair game between about 14K and 15K as far as being kind of our next major bounce area. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. And as always, thank you for stopping in. I appreciate all the support I've had recently on the channel as we've broken 300 subscribers. Again, if you're brand new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please do me that favor on your way out. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. It's